Welcome back to Candid Conversations. How you doing, Candace?
I am doing well, Chris. How about yourself?
Pretty good. It's been a while since we've recorded an episode in here, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah, but I'm very excited. I've kind of eagerly been awaiting our next guest.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, because our next guest, our guest today, is the Chancellor of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Charles Isbell. And let me do a quick bio, and then we'll jump into some questions for our Chancellor. So Charles L. Isbell is the 11th Chancellor of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He is a computationalist, researcher, and an award-winning teacher who has been recognized internationally for his work in providing high-quality, accessible education at scale. His research has focused on artificial intelligence and machine learning, with an emphasis on how these systems interact with humans in responsible and inclusive ways. Welcome to the show, Chancellor Isbell.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Let's jump in. Candace, let's fire up some questions.
So can you just start off by telling us a little bit about your leadership journey? Like, what were some of those pivotal points that made you the leader that you are today?
Oh, I like that question. Thank you very much. So there's a very long answer and there's a somewhat shorter answer. So I'll just give you some of the shorter answer. If you want to follow up anyway, we can do that. I think there's a couple of key things that matter here when you think about sort of my professional career. The first is that I knew what I wanted to do when I was about 8.5 years old. I knew I wanted to be a professor. I knew I wanted to be a machine learning AI computationalist, and I knew I wanted to do something that had to do with education beyond the teaching part. I actually started out wanting to be a teacher, and then my teachers told me not to be a teacher and to be a professor, and I was like, okay, sure. And so that's kind of where that went. And as time went on, as I went through the various grades and had different experiences, it just became more of a thing that I wanted to do. I had started to understand what the difference was between being a professor, being in college versus K through 12, and I started to understand really what it meant to be a computationalist and to think about machine learning. I just kept doing that. I went to school. I went to grad school. I kept kind of moving along the way. I took a 4-year detour, as it were, to work at AT&T Labs, which was a lot of fun, but really sort of got me prepared in my research side of my career. And then I ended up as a professor at Georgia Tech, where I was for 21 years and a month. And the thing that sort of is different about my journey compared to many people is that the day I became an associate professor with tenure was the day I became an associate dean of undergraduate education. And so I did all of those things at the same time. 3 years later, I went up for full, and the day I became a full professor was the day I became senior associate dean. And so kind of my academic journey on the research teaching side completely mirrored the administrative and service side. And what I believed at the time, and I still believe now, is that we should be putting as much energy into what does it mean to create an educational enterprise that is at scale and reaches as many people as possible as we put into our research and we put into our teaching. And I've sort of followed that all along. A lot more details there, but that's sort of how I kind of ended up roughly where I was. I was there for, like I said, 21 years and a month. I left the South and went to Wisconsin-Madison, where I was provost for 23 months. And then I came here, where I am, as of this recording, 49 weeks and 4 days in.
Love the details.
So I have to ask, how does an 8-year-old know they want to work in AI and machine learning?
The 8-year-old doesn't know enough to know that it's crazy to think that that's what you want to do. I've always been into science fiction. I've always been into reading. And what I really liked was the idea of building an intelligent thing. Those were sort of all around me. I was really into Heinlein and, of course, collect a ton of comic books. I've been doing that even at that age. I was into reading those things. And so just that world made a lot of sense to me. And I loved my teachers. I just loved school. I loved learning. I just loved all of that. And so I wanted to do what they did. So those things together meant I'm going to sit there and I'm going to learn how to teach, and I'm going to sort of follow in the footsteps of people I admired, including my mother, who was not a teacher, but she was a social worker, and she oversaw Bankhead Child Development Center and Eastlake Child Development Center in what at the time was the Atlanta Housing Authority. And I saw her as a teacher, even though that's not quite what she was. She was actually an administrator. And it just felt like the right thing to do.
How does that feel? There's so many of us that somebody asked us when we were young, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you had this clear idea. How does it feel now to have realized that?
I was very lucky. I mean, I think I was a sophomore in college before I realized that this isn't what the path that sort of everyone took, people didn't always know what they wanted and they sort of stayed there. It just never occurred to me, which was actually a pretty important lesson for me, which is that if you just assume that everyone else has had the experiences that you have, you miss out on a ton of what's going on, because you start assuming if someone has changed majors, there must be a problem. It's not that they're discovering who they are. If someone is doing something that is in any way different from you, you start imposing your own values and experiences on them, and that almost always leads to a bad result. So although it took me a long time to figure this out, relatively speaking, I do kind of feel like there was something important there. And I'm very, very lucky that the thing that I wanted to be turned out to be the thing that I wanted to be.
You mentioned you're almost at a year here. So what do you see like right now as your biggest opportunities as chancellor?
Well, so this is a great university. I don't think I have to convince anyone of that. But in case you're wondering, this is a great university. And the thing that's interesting about this university is people are aware. People at the place and around us are aware that it's a great university, but they're also very much aware that we can do even more. I think the opportunity here is to help to create the environment to support people, students, staff, faculty, to be able to take us from being great to being truly preeminent to being eminent, and to be a true leader in a time when higher ed and the body politic in general absolutely needs leadership. We are one of the few places that can actually do that. We've got all of the talent. We've got a history. We are broad. We have the land grant mission. There's so many great things about this place that sets it up for that, but also we're in a political environment that is supportive. We do not have a legislature or a governor that's trying to destroy us. In fact, they're trying to support us. We've got a long history here. We have, relatively speaking, quite a bit of trust in the community, not as much as we should, and we should work on that a little bit more. But we have all of the ingredients. And I think the opportunity here is to take advantage of the moment so that when we're on the other side of it, people are looking back and they see us as leaders.
You've been here almost a year, and you've launched the new Illinois Leads strategic planning process. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. So that's a part of this part of this conversation. So we officially launched it on December 18th of last year. And why did we do that? I'm looking off screen. Why do we do it? It's my birthday. So Excellent. Now everybody knows when my birthday is. And I wanted to give myself a birthday gift, and I wanted to give the community one. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to do something different. We wanted to do something quickly, but not rush it. So I wanted to give as many people as possible an opportunity to reflect positively on what it is they love about this place and where it is they think it can go. And so we included not just the staff, not just the faculty, not just the students, but community leaders. We had meetings where we brought people from across the state. We brought people from around the surrounding city, and we asked them how things looked to them, and tried to kind of get a feel about what people thought was really great about this. We called it Illinois Leads because it feels as if that is what this university is poised to really, truly do, even more than it has in the past. And I think that has been borne out. So we will release the strategic plan with lots of words and agreed upon language that reflects what we've heard in the next couple of months as we tape this. And then we will build upon that. And it's meant to be a real thing. So a lot of people will say, oh, the new guy comes in, he has a birthday, and so he decides to do a strategic planning exercise. But this is actually really important, because what strategic plans let you do is they let you match vision and resources. If you have infinite resources, it doesn't matter. If you have no resources, it doesn't matter. But we're in a place where we have some resources. We have a lot of possibilities of things we could do, but we need to be able to quickly respond to an environment and do the things that we all sort of kind of understand as a direction where we want to go. And this is a true north. It's a place where we can point to and say, well, we all agreed on this. The world has changed suddenly in this way. We're going to do this because that's consistent with this and allows us to deal with this and move forward. So it's actually really important. And in the future, you'll hear me say almost nothing that doesn't refer back to our shared understanding of the strategic plan.
So as I understand it, Illinois Leads, one of the things that it's trying to do is sort of establish us and sort of maybe remind the world that we are globally elite, but at the same time remain publicly grounded. We're a land grant institution. How do you prevent this idea of prestige from pulling the institution away from the people that it's supposed to serve?
Right. I mean, that is a great question. In some sense, that is the question. And it's two different questions, right? It's a question of whether it can happen in reality, and there's a question of whether it happens in terms of perception. It doesn't matter whether we aren't doing that if everyone thinks that we are. And so I begin by rejecting the premise that these things are not in conflict with one another at all, but also recognizing that there's a difference between being elite and being elitist. There's nothing wrong with being elite. That's just about being exceptional. It's about excellence. It's about doing something that matters. And that's why we're all here, right? The whole point is to have an impact and to leave our imprint on the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that by excluding, or you can do that by bringing people in. And given that we are a public university, we are the land grant, we are huge, we have a long history, we have to be able to do that. And we are very good at doing it at scale. So those things come hand in hand. How can you be living up to your public mission? How can you be impacting the world in a positive way if you are not great at it? And that is, by its very definition, elite. So long as we remind ourselves constantly that we are serving the public, then being elite, being exceptional, being excellent is just one way of serving the public. So if we keep coming back to it again and again and again, this is who we are, this is the world that we want to create, then it would be malpractice not to be elite at that.
Love the way you frame that.
You kind of alluded to this, but the plan is, ambitious, but what leadership behaviors do you model personally to keep it from just sitting on a shelf and getting, dust and not being implemented?
Well, I think you have to do sort of two things at once from where I'm sitting, right? One, you have to articulate what it is and what the point is, not just in the details, but sort of what the overall vision is. And then you have to live up to it and remind people of it constantly. So again, when I decide to have hot chocolate in the morning, it's going to be because the strategic plan supports it, right? We're actually going to organize ourselves around it. Doesn't mean we're eliminating things that people do. The point of a strategic plan is not to say no, it's to say this is the order in which we're going to do things. So maybe it's the 57th thing, and maybe we'll only get to do 56 things this year, but it doesn't mean that we've eliminated something. What it means is that we've made real decisions about what we're going to do together, but those things have to be in service of an ultimate goal. So what is the ultimate goal here? Whatever the details are, exactly how the words come out, how we talk about it, how it develops over time, I do believe that at its core is a kind of fundamental idea, which is that the University of Illinois should influence every important political, social, and technological decision in the world, period. Someone has to do it. Might as well be us. We're great at it. We have a history. Let's do that. If you believe that, tied in with our public mission, and believe that we have to do it at scale, you believe it has to be excellent, then each of us has to model that. So when we talk about what we're doing next, when I am representing the university about where we're going, I am going to talk about that big impact at scale. I'm going to talk about, we care about our public mission. We care about bringing in as many people as possible. And I'm going to try to model it by living up to that personally, and very importantly, supporting everyone else as they do that, to highlight the things that people do, whether it's winning a Nobel Prize or creatively making a podcast that allows people to interact and talk with one another and share their views around the world. All of these things are part of the story. Every single person here should see how they fit into it and be able to say, this thing that I do ties in with this, and it moves forward. And you just have to do that, and you have to support it, and you have to bring it up and elevate it so that everyone can see it. That's a lot of part of my job.
I want to follow up on that just a little bit, because we do an exercise in a leadership program that we help facilitate, where we have the cohort members draw the org chart all the way from the university president down to them to sort of see the kind of political structure above them. And many of those cohort members are drawing themselves 9, 10 layers below the university president. So how do you get that mission, that message that I'm part of this, down to the edges of our university? Well,
you work really hard to build language where people understand what it is that we're saying and they can see themselves in it. If you see yourself that one of the central things that we care about is supporting the students, then when you mow the lawn, when you plant the flowers, you are creating the environment that allows the researchers to do the research they do in an environment that supports them. You're allowing the students to feel that they belong and that this is a place that cares about them. Whatever it is that you're doing, you are a part of this much larger story. And you have to create the language that allows people to see that. And then you also have to live up to that. You have to say, look, this really matters, and here's why it matters. This thing that you think doesn't have anything to do with this, it has everything to do with it. If that's not there, we're worse off than we would have been otherwise. And whether you're one layer in, whether you're the chancellor running the university, whether you're the president of the system over there somewhere, whether you're a vice chancellor, whether you're a director, whatever it is that you're doing, you should be able to see how the overall strategic plan aligns with what it is that you're doing and how you fit into it. Here, 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 or here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go without it. A thing I like to say a lot is we're part of a story, right? We have to realize that we don't want to think of ourselves as irreplaceable in the sense that if we leave, the whole thing collapses. It's not true. No matter, the world will go on whether we want it to or not. But that's not the same thing as being fungible. So the world is a different place. The conversation is different from what it would have been. The story is different from where it would have gone because you were in the room, because you had the conversation. So even though it sometimes feels like, there's 100,000 people, there's like 500,000 alum, there's too much that can't possibly matter. Even the small conversations you have do matter, and they move us just a little bit. If you think about it as a giant aircraft carrier, the goal is just to move from here to here. For those of you who are listening, I have moved a very small amount. It's just to move from here to here, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's the difference between ending up all the way over there in that corner and all the way over there in that corner. And if you're a part of just moving it even just a little bit, you have changed the direction where it's not just ending up tomorrow, but where it's going to end up in 100 years. We have to believe that. And the good news is it's easy to believe because it's true.
You've been in higher ed for a while.
Thank you.
And so have I. Everybody at this table has been in higher ed for a long time. We've seen a lot. Not often surprised. But I want to know, what surprised you in your first year here as chancellor?
There are a lot of things, but I think there's one thing in particular, which is a pleasant surprise. So, I mean, when you ask me sort of about my journey, there's one particular thing that was true. So when I became an assistant professor, I actually spent, the first 3 or 4 years, I would actually come up here 2-3 times a year. I was working with this group called MEAD, which was modeling hurricanes. It's going to be a Category 4, it's going to make landfall, that kind of a thing. They needed a computer science guy or machine learning guy, and they did the modeling. This is where I learned how to do interdisciplinary research at scale. This was a great place. So I've had a long history with this place. I have a lot of friends who are here or were here. And so I had this model in my head of the kind of place that it was. So when I came here as chancellor, having not been on campus maybe for almost 20 years at that point, one very pleasant surprise is that it's as I remembered it. It lives up to the hype. It lives up to its vision of itself as a big, at-scale, interdisciplinary university. And while that wasn't a surprise in the sense of like, oh my God, I can't believe that's true, it was a surprise in the sense of, I'm glad it's as I thought it was. And I'm glad that people see it that way and are interested in moving it even further forward. So that was a very pleasant surprise.
This place is impressive when you look at it.
It is impressive when you look at it. And it would be nice if the rest of the world knew that a little bit more, like we do.
We know that this is a very impressive place, which is great. And hopefully more people will know that. So to say that your job is significant is very important, is also very stressful, I can assume sometimes. How do you take care of yourself as a leader so that you can be the best leader and lead our campus?
Well, this morning, I played an hour and a half of racquetball, which I enjoyed. I came back from a long series of trips to make certain on Sunday I could play ultimate frisbee, which those are ways in which I relax. I still buy my comic books every Wednesday. I try to talk to people and just sort of be a part of the community as opposed to separate from the community. That's not always easy, but it is something that I strive to do. I think I understand pretty well the things that make me happy, including just vegging in front of a TV every once in a while. And I try to make certain that there's room to do that. And sometimes it just means sitting in a chair and staring off into space, and that's good. So I think it's important for people in any position, certainly in a position like this where you're asked to be on all the time, to understand how it is you wind down, how it is you develop the energy to wake up and do the thing again the next day, and then lean into it. Don't say, well, I'll just put that off until next. And lean into it and make certain that you always find a little bit of time to do that. And sometimes you'll have lots of time and sometimes you'll have almost none. But if you know it's coming, it's easy to walk there.
Do you play racquetball solo or do you have a partner?
You mean by myself?
Yeah.
I like to play.
You could play by yourself in the court.
I could, and at least I'd win all the time.
Yeah.
I like to play doubles, actually, because it's a different game. You have to be a better shot because you're playing against two other people instead of one. This morning I played cutthroat. So that's a three-person version of racquetball.
Do they notice when you've had a particularly stressful day the day earlier?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know that I hit the ball any harder than I normally do. But I don't know. I come in on pretty relaxed. So.
The universities have this pressure to simultaneously sort of be elite. We were talking about that before. Accessible, innovative, affordable, politically resilient. Which of these tensions do you think that higher ed leaders still underestimate? So let me answer that by answering a slightly different question, just slightly different. Before you ask what higher ed leaders think, let's ask what higher ed thinks, the people who make it up. And I think the answer to that's pretty clear. It's politically resilient. I think that the faculty in particular, but also the students and the staff, as well as the administrators and the people support, don't always appreciate or recognize or want to believe that we are political entities. We're trying to create knowledge. We are making decisions about bringing people in. We're conveners. It is by we share our values. It is by its very nature a political act. And we like to think of ourselves as being apolitical, but we're political actors in the world. And so I think we tend to underestimate the fact that we are political actors because it feels dirty. It feels, grimy. We don't want to think about it. We want to think about what we do. But that's always the mistake. So I think we tend to underestimate that as a collective. I think your academic leaders, particularly as you move up the chain, are painfully aware that you have to be politically resilient, but are not always willing to deal with the reality that it's not the case that everyone around them necessarily sees it that way. And so you have to do a lot of work to make it so that people recognize that and then to bring them along in a way that still allows them to do what they do. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, certainly in the year that we happen to be in.
Higher education leaders increasingly operate in a climate of distrust, whether it be political distrust, institutional distrust, even distrust of expertise itself. So how do you lead effectively when authority itself is questioned?
Well, there's nothing wrong with questioning authority. It's probably the right thing to do in general.
Thinking.
Absolutely. I think from where we're sitting, though, you have to remind yourself constantly that your job, when we started this in the beginning, you asked me a question in the beginning, we are serving the public. We have to remember that. We are in a service industry. We are trying to help them. We're trying to produce knowledge, but to what end? To make the world a better place. So we are necessarily doing service. Given that the goal is to create knowledge, it is to educate people, that is to have a positive impact, it means the opinions of all the people we're interacting with really matters. And if we want to understand the opinions of the people we're interacting with, then we have to listen to them. And it is important to understand the difference between listening and waiting for your turn to speak, right? And so if we remember always that we have to listen, then two good things come out of it. One, people know. They know when you're listening and when you're not listening. But also, you actually get better science out of it. You get better technology. You get better results when you actually think about how the rest of the world is intaking what you are producing. So it is a partnership, right? And the way you build trust is by doing that, by people believing that you are listening to them and that you're trying to understand where they're coming from and that it's a true partnership. So a lot of people immediately go to, you just got to tell your story better and then the people will trust you. But you got to have a better story to tell. And if you are listening to them and what people want, then it's a much easier thing to do. So that's how I think you build trust. You actually genuinely engage with people and listen to them.
Do you have an example of when that's happened recently?
Well, yes and no. I think there's a lot of conversation. So, for example, we're doing a lot of work in Chicago. This predates me, but I'm sort of a part of it now. There's a lot of people who are really wondering whether our intents in Chicago are positive or whether we're just doing it because we're doing it and there's a piece of land there and we can do like quantum and AI and all these kinds of things. So what you discover when you have these conversations with the larger community is that they want to hear what it is you're actually trying to do, and they want to know that you're listening, that you're going to positively impact them, and you aren't, another in a long line of people who say they're going to do this and then not have it happen. And so I think my predecessors, I think the people who are building all the work that we're doing, specifically in Chicago, is just an example that comes to me with the quantum microelectronics part, have done a lot of that work and brought in a lot of the larger community to ask them what they want and to try to make certain that we are not seen as invaders, but seen as partners. And one thing that's important about that is it takes a long time. This is not you show up on a Tuesday and then Wednesday you go. This is years of conversations. It involves tons of people to be a part of it, of which, I'm just one of many, you are two of many. Lots of people have to be engaged in that. I think that's an example that as I came in, I saw all of the groundwork that was laid for that, and it looks pretty good to me, and hopefully we'll keep doing it.
So your research background is in machine learning and AI. We are in this rapid race to figure out how to harness AI in higher education. I want to ask a question about AI and optimization and how that relates to organizations, because if in some cases a rush towards optimization can actually break organizations. And so how do you know when efficiency starts to undermine culture and creativity? And how do we find that balance?
Right. Well, it's interesting you use the word undermine, right? Because, in some sense, even to make a positive change, you have to undermine what's going on in some sense, right? You don't want to undermine the core and the culture and the things you care about, but you have to push against the things that people are already doing if you're going to change them. But you also have to accept that it's culture. It's real. It's like people do not move my cheese, right? People really believe in the thing that they believe in. So undermining has sort of negative connotation. So we can ask the question maybe slightly differently, which is, how do you do this in a way where your optimization doesn't make you fragile to change that is coming and make people recoil from accepting what you're trying to do together? They stop thinking about the long-term impact and they start thinking instead about, well, what is this doing for me today? And then they don't engage in it. And the answer is it's very hard. And it's a long process. And it goes back to your question about trust, right? The trust isn't just the universities, how the rest of the world views us in terms of trust. It's how the people inside of it view each other. And so you just got to keep coming back. It's exactly the same problem, is exactly the same solution. And you have to be ready to be flexible. And every once in a while you have to break something, but you have to immediately be ready to repair.
So I thought of this question because my daughter's a junior, and back in the day, they asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Mm-hmm. And her response in middle school, even before middle school, she was like, oh, the job that I want to be doesn't even exist yet. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, how do we in higher education prepare students today for careers that may not even exist?
Well, first off, you have to recognize that is a large part of what you're doing, right? I mean, I think you talk to anyone who's been doing this for a long time. One of you said this word earlier, critical thinking, right? You're teaching people how to learn. You're teaching people how to react and reflect. You're not just teaching them how to do this specific thing and then have it all sort of break apart as soon as the world changes in even a small way. And that's the basic answer. But I think from the point of view of how you set up a world like that, you have given me the excuse to talk about my third favorite law. So my third favorite law is Amara's Law. And Amara's Law states that we overestimate the short-term impact of technology and we underestimate its long-term impact. This is not the hype cycle. It's not about investing and people do this in the stock market. It's not about that. It's about what are the consequences of the things that I'm doing, whether it is technology or whether it is a social movement or whether it's a piece of art, right? Like you tend to think about what's going to happen in the short term and you don't think about the long term. So we can, as an example, go back to the early 90s and think about sort of the modern World Wide Web and all that did, which of course happened right here in Illinois. Now, if you go back and you read what people were saying, the world was going to change radically by, 1996, and everything was going to be different, and FTP and Gopher were going to change the way science was done, and the fact that 95% of your listeners are like, what the hell is he talking about, shows you that didn't happen. But I'll tell you what did happen. 25 years later, we have social media. which has radically changed our relationships to one another. Podcasts did not exist, at least not as we think about them now, but they're now one of the main ways of YouTube. Like everything is different, both for good and for ill. So we have a real, I don't know. There's an epidemic of loneliness, particularly among middle-aged men. There's an increase in the amount of bullying and pressure that young girls feel in high school, right? The world is different. We know that elections have been changed because of this. We know that we tend to isolate ourselves. Somehow we're in a crowded room of 1,000 people, but we're all alone because we're looking at our devices. That was all but inevitable, including AI and where we are now, all but inevitable once we started going down that path, that we would end up with this kind of technology. What was not inevitable is that it would shape out the way that it did. So if you can think about how radically different the world was in 1991 from the way it is now, then you should be asking yourself as you teach, as you create curriculum, as you try to set students up, if I try to find myself 35 years in the future, with this new piece of technology, this new algorithm, this new way of critiquing and thinking about the world, how different is it going to be in 35 years? You have to be asking yourself that question and then ask, well, even if I don't know what it's going to be, how am I going to set up people so that they're ready for that, particularly as the pace of change accelerates? That is our job as educators, whether we're thinking about it as researchers specifically or we're thinking about it as people who are teaching. And we can't know what that answer is, but we can know that there's a set of skills you're going to have and flexibility you have to make that work as individuals. As an organization, we're going to have to change ourselves so that we can bring in people as they continually have to learn. And that's a different view of what a university looks like.
Change pace a little bit here. You had earlier in the conversation, you mentioned, I think, sort of the university enterprise, sort of the organization, the running of this place. We celebrate intellectual brilliance, but we really struggle with operational excellence.
Yes.
Why is that gap so persistent in higher education?
Because for the same reason that we don't like to think about being politically resilient, we collectively do not like to think about the fact that things actually have to work and run because it's messy and it's distracting from the things that we do. And we just think about the faculty who are all brilliant, every single one of them. We select for people who are not interested and should not be interested in that most of the time. And then we build an infrastructure around them that allows them to focus on the things that they care about. This is not just true for faculty, but it's kind of easier to see, I think, with faculty. So operational excellence seems beside the point. Now, I could give you also a meaner answer. So let me give you the meaner answer for a second, which is one of the problems with the way that we educate people with, get PhDs and go off, right, is we ask them to do something ridiculous, right? So we want you to create or invent something no one else has ever thought of. Think about how huge your ego has to be to believe that you can do that. And then they do it, myself included. And then depending upon how your field is structured, you then every 6 months thereafter, do it through your students, right? So you kind of have to believe that you can do anything you want to. And the mistake that we often make is we tell ourselves, well, I could do that thing. And we confuse the fact that we could with we can. So I'm 100% believe that I could have been an amazing lawyer. That does not mean that I can be an amazing lawyer. I didn't spend 20 years thinking about it and doing those things. And so sometimes that's why operational things fall through, because a lot of the people think, well, I'm sure I could have done that if I had made different decisions in my life. Therefore, I'm not going to think about it. But nothing that we want to do, certainly when you think about it at the level of a strategic plan and the big things that we're putting in front of, none of it can be done without a kind of ruthless fealty to efficiency and operational excellence. We can't make it happen. If the classes don't get delivered, if the procurement doesn't happen well, if IT infrastructure doesn't actually work, if these things don't exist, it all falls apart. The problem with operational excellence for a lot of people is if you're being operationally excellent, nobody notices. They only notice when it fails. And so it's very easy to just think it must not be important. But I guarantee you, we should not be spending our time thinking about the boiler room right now. But once the boiler goes, we're going to remind ourselves of what operational excellence is.
As someone who has worked at this place for 33 years in IT, I feel that deeply.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and jump back to machine learning. So in machine learning, biased data creates distorted outcomes. So what's the leadership equivalent of biased data, and how do you guard against it personally?
So if you think about the way biased data works, right, the way machine learning kind of goes wrong. So people talk about they hallucinate, which is a fundamental mistake. All they do is hallucinate. Sometimes they happen to be right, but all they're doing is hallucinating, right? It's a probability, high dimensional probability distribution over blah, blah. It doesn't even take world events into account. It does it through language. It's actually kind of cool that works at all. But of course, it's just making up stuff that happens to have regular structure, and so often it is right. So that's the first thing you have to realize is that even when you get it right, it doesn't mean that you did the right thing. And sometimes when you get it wrong, it doesn't mean that you did the wrong thing. So you have to just accept that. That's thing one. Second thing you have to realize where the bias comes from is people just sort of presuming their own conclusion. They just refuse to ask. They don't refuse. They tend not to ask the question, well, what if we did something differently? Or what are my unanswered, unsurfaced questions? So you always have to ask yourself, well, what are the things that I'm assuming? What are the questions I'm not asking? Which is hard to do because it takes a lot of time. And that leads you down a bad path when it comes to science. It leads you down a bad path when it comes to using these machine learning tools well. So what does it have to do with the university? What does it do with It's exactly the same thing. What are your unexamined assumptions? When do we just assume the way that I've always done something works? And remember, the thing about computers is they do what you tell them, not what you want them to do. And so you have to be very, very careful about understanding what it is you want, and then you have to walk down that path. This is actually why strategic plans matter, because if you can agree on the goals, agree on the values, and agree on where you're going, then you always have something to come back to test against what you're doing rather than simply reacting to whatever's going on around the world. It's the same problem in some sense. It's assuming that everything that has happened makes sense and not thinking about how the world has changed so that your assumptions no longer work. And you just have to do this. You have to do this all the time and not be upset when someone comes in and tells you the thing that you've been doing your whole life maybe doesn't make sense anymore, even if it was the right thing to do for the last decade.
You mentioned earlier about faculty wanting to do whatever they want to do, right? It's this cohort of highly intelligent, highly independent people. What have you learned about motivating people that are fundamentally don't want to be managed?
Well, I don't want to be managed, so I appreciate that position. So what motivates me? What motivates me is understanding where it is we're trying to go, deciding I agree with that, and then going off and doing it. I think what you have to do to all people, not just the ones who don't want to be, no one really wants to be managed. So you have to do this for everyone. Help them to see where you're going. Give them the opportunity to be a part of it. And if they want to be a part of it, then give them the ability to do what they need to do to be a part of it. That means articulating where you want to go. It means having shared goals. It means having shared language. And that's a lot of work, but it's well worth it, because once you have it down, you can make decisions quickly. People can see where it's going. They're going to be okay with it. And you can move forward for at least a few years before you have to do it all over again.
So what advice do you have for young academics who are interested in pursuing leadership in higher ed, like leadership positions in higher education?
Recognize that it really is a calling of its own, in the same way that being a professor is a calling of its own, being a teacher is a calling of its own, and treat it seriously. Treat it very, very seriously.
Tell me more about treat it seriously.
It's not just a thing you do to get paid during the summer. It's not just a thing that you do because there's a problem and I just want to deal with this and I don't want to think about anything else. It is a commitment to supporting others. Like, it's actually a shift. So the particular shift is, there's two parts to the shift. One is you have to be okay with feeling good by enabling others to succeed. You just have to. And you have to recognize that's what's going to happen. So after being in a field or being in a discipline or being in a sector where credit is the only thing that matters, and you need to get accolades, you have to realize that stops. At least it stops in the general thing. And in fact, the people you are trying to support will often tell you you're a terrible person. You just have to be okay with that. You will get your accolades. People will appreciate what you do, particularly the ones who go through this. But you have to recognize that you are moving beyond what is you're doing for your own research group or for your own discipline or for your own students or your own classroom, and you're moving towards thinking about a larger institution. And always keep that larger institution in mind. And it is worth it. And it is a lot of fun if that's the kind of thing that motivates you. And I think that's a kind of fundamental thing you have to be okay with. You have to become an institutionalist. I like to think of myself as being three things. I'm a pragmatist. We've got a problem. Let's find a solution. I am an institutionalist. What is the organization I'm a part of and the organization my organization is a part of? How do we make that better and how do we do trade-offs? And I'm an optimist. So you have to believe it's going to work out if you just kind of keep doing the right thing. And the other first piece of advice that I would give someone as they walk down this or any other path is to realize, and this is actually a very machine learning thing too, it turns out you can only really learn from mistakes.
Oh, of course.
The secret is they don't have to be your mistakes.
Even better.
Much better. So take advantage of the fact that a lot of this structure is set up so that you can observe, be in the room, see even, leadership things you were talking about earlier. It's an opportunity to see what other people do, and you can learn from them, both from the things that go well and the things that go poorly. And then you don't have to relive all of the mistakes yourself. You can, in fact, build on the things that people have created for you.
How have you dealt with the tension between kind of being this individual researcher and being an administrator? Because time gets in the way, time and space get in the way. So how do you personally deal with that? Because I think maybe that's something that a young academic who's considering administration is worried that they're just not going to have enough time to be the star in their field.
Well, they're just not mutually exclusive things. So I had a friend who used to collect data on sort of faculty performance. He was just interested. He was just a nerd. So he had access. He used make scripts, by the way, to pull out all of this data over all these databases. And he discovered something really interesting. If you plot things like how many folks someone teaches and, their research thing, you get these bands of people. It turns out the most productive scholars are often the most productive teachers, right? These things, it feels like they're trade-offs. They're not actually trade-offs. They're people just kind of live in a band. And there may be a budget, but you can increase the pie of your budget. And so you can do really well in more than one thing at once. So you just have to commit to wanting to do well in both of those things. It's perfectly fine to be elite and excellent in research, and perfectly fine to be elite and excellent in teaching, and perfectly fine to be elite and excellent in service. And you can do all of those things. They're trade-offs only in that there's a finite amount of time, but if you get better and better at it and you're motivated, you will be able to do more and more of each, because somehow people manage this, and they've been doing it for centuries and millennia. So then why can't you do it? I just don't think it is a trade-off of a sort, but it's not the fundamental trade-off that I think people think it is.
Thank you. So to wrap us up here today, and in the spirit of Candid Conversations, the name of this podcast, what's the one thing that most people don't know about you that you're willing to share with our listeners and viewers?
I am really quiet, which nobody believes.
I said, really?
Yeah.
Dive into that a little bit.
I'm much more of an introvert than I appear.
Okay.
I like to sit alone, which I don't think anyone ever believes when I say it. So people can decide whether I'm being candid or not. But at the end, I really just like sitting back in my house, alone, watching TV, reading a book, playing a video game, and that's how I relax. I'm a quiet guy.
So what would you watch if you just had time to yourself?
What's the last thing that I just rewatched? I'm currently rewatching Babylon 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's a good series.
I wish they would remaster that. It was an amazing series. You know what I really liked about Babylon 5? That the first season was kind of terrible, but it retroactively became brilliant as season 2 and season 3 and season 4 went on, because all the seeds were there from the very beginning.
They redeemed it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just, well, it was new actors and not a lot of money, but he really had a vision. He planted all of those seeds. And when you finally watch, Babylon Squared or whatever, and then you go back and look, it's just all of this has been set up. All of this thing was done 4 years earlier. It was just brilliant.
That's not a bad metaphor for strategic planning.
You plant this. I chose the right things carefully. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chancellor Isbell, for joining us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure our viewers and listeners are going to really love this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.